the creepy original story about Cinderella to help you fall asleep. Cinderella, the familiar story known to everyone through movies, animations, and as a bedtime tale for little children. However, the version most people are familiar with is a retelling to suit the general public. The original story of Cinderella comes from the Grimm brothers' fairy tales. The story I am about to tell is considered the original version with some variations, but it is not as beautiful as you might think, and is relatively horrifying. Do not let your children listen to it. Now let's begin the story. Once upon a time, in a desolate village bathed in eternal twilight, there was a young girl named Aschenputtel. Her life was steeped in suffering and darkness. Her mother, a kind-hearted woman, lay on her deathbed in a shabby room lit only by candlelight. With her last breath, she whispered to Aschenputtel,
"Always be kind and pure, and you will always be protected by me."
As the life faded from her mother's eyes, a chilling wind swept through the house, marking the beginning of Aschenputtel's dark days. Winter arrived, and snow covered her mother's grave with a pure white blanket, just like her heart. Before long, her father remarried, bringing home a cunning and manipulative woman and her 2 daughters. These stepsisters were also very beautiful, but had cruel hearts influenced by their wicked mother. Since her father was often away on business, the new family treated Aschenputtel worse than a servant, making her sleep by the ashes near the fireplace, next to the filthy and cold barn. As she slept by the ashes for so long, her once pure face became smeared with soot, giving rise to the name Cinderella. Her days were filled with endless chores, her hands raw and bleeding, while her stepmother and stepsisters indulged in luxury and vanity. At night, she was haunted by the whispers of the wind, which seemed to carry her mother's voice. She cried, longing for her mother and the warm home they once had, now a distant luxury. One cold winter night, as Aschenputtel shivered by the fireplace, her father returned from his trip, bringing extravagant gifts for his new wife and her daughters. But for Aschenputtel, he brought a twisted branch, the first thing that had touched his hat on his way home. Peculiar gift that was nothing compared to the gifts given to the stepmother and stepsister. Nevertheless, it was what she had requested. The next day, she took it to her mother's grave, where she wept bitterly. Branch, soaked in her tears, began to grow into a twisted tree with thorny branches. On the tree perched a ghostly white bird with eyes that glowed like embers. Every day, she would go to the graveyard, pressing her face against her mother's grave and sharing the hardships she endured. Around that time, the king held a grand event, find a bride for the prince. News of the event spread quickly, causing all the young women in the village to become excited, including Aschenputtel. This could be her chance to escape her miserable life. However, the stepmother only allowed her 2 daughters to attend, leaving Aschenputtel behind with even more chores to keep her from going to the ball. She went to her mother's grave and cried, when suddenly the bird on the tree spoke in a voice that chilled Aschenputtel to the bone.
"What do you wish for, poor pretty girl?"
Shivering and sobbing, she expressed her desire to go to the palace and meet the prince, hoping to escape her imprisonment. The bird's eyes blazed, and with a ruffling of wings, it dropped a pitch-black gown and glass slippers made from shattered glass at her feet. The bird warned her,
The magic will end at midnight, and if you are caught, you will face death, and your soul will be trapped forever.
Aschenputtel quickly dressed and went to the ball, her beauty eerie and haunting. The prince was enchanted and lusted after her. He approached her, taking her hand forcefully and spinning her around with a dark, obsessed look in his eyes. As midnight approached, Aschenputtel had to flee, leaving behind a trail of darkness. In her haste, she lost one of her glass slippers, which shattered on the cold stone steps of the palace. The next day, Prince, now obsessed with her, declared that he would marry the girl whose foot fit the glass slipper. He searched the town but found no one who fit. Finally, he arrived at Aschenputtel's house. To ensure Aschenputtel couldn't be found, the stepmother locked her in the cellar, tying her up and breaking her arm. The stepsisters, desperate to win the prince's favor, mutilated their own feet to fit the slipper. One sister cut off her toes, while the other sawed off her heel, their gruesome actions accompanied by their sinister laughter. They believed that as princesses, they wouldn't need to walk. Their wounds were barely bandaged, and blood soaked through the slipper. That not enough to convince Prince. The bird appeared again, freeing Aschenputtel from her bonds. She was finally able to try on the slipper, which fit perfect. Prince took her to the palace, ready for their wedding. On the night of the wedding, the palace was filled with shadows that seemed to whisper Aschenputtel's name. The stepsisters, driven by jealousy and ambition, tried to win her favor. But the ghostly bird returned, gouging out their eyes and sending them to their mother as a warning. Their fate was also sealed. Initially, Aschenputtel's life with the prince seemed perfect, but gradually, he began to treat her like an object. She had to serve him every night, enduring brutal beatings while he had affairs with numerous other women. The abuse became increasingly severe, and although everyone in the palace knew, they turned a blind eye. Aschenputtel had no voice. Her resentment grew until one night, following the bird's suggestion, she took a knife and stabbed the prince in the chest, blood splattering across the floor and her face. That night, a storm raged, thunder and wind drowning out the screams. The birds helped her clean up and escape. She returned to the old house, a house tainted by the members her father had invited in, and one of them was sleeping soundly. She's standing right next to her. The bird suggested she kill her stepmother, and she did so. She severing each finger of the stepmother before delivering a final stab right in the heart, just as she had done to the prince. She spared her stepsisters, who had already paid with their permanent blindness. After everything, she felt she had no purpose left. She went to her mother's grave, opened the coffin, and lay inside, embracing the nearly skeletal remains. Stroking her mother's hair, she asked the birds to close the coffin lid, choosing an end she believed to be happy.